So look, first of all, we are interested in hearing about the other side of the story, not necessarily just the victims, but the offenders, and how it impacts on their lives and the lives of their families. Can you tell us a bit about your experience with the offenders and their families?
Well, the offenders' families are directly affected by the offender being charged with a single punch homicide, of course. But its impact on the wider community at large is never really understood, I apprehend sometimes. But many mothers have been in my chambers crying and distressed together with their husbands, the siblings, the girlfriends and the close friends of the offender. They're all impacted upon, as well as their sporting mates, workplace mates and relatives.
And the offenders themselves, often they're incarcerated for these crimes and so
yes.
Therefore their lives are forever changed.
In many cases it's first time in custody, first time offending in many cases. The impact upon them is also devastating. They have suddenly found their freedom, which is really an illusion taken from them, over a very bad decision that they've made at the time, without really considering the impact upon themselves and indeed upon the unfortunate victim.
How often do these one-punch cases come up from your experience, and
Well,
are they increasing?
Well, too often. Yes, they are increasing. I see in your news on Saturday night that the police cracked down upon violence, street violence in Newcastle, revealed that a young man had been charged with a single punch, but fortunately there was not a homicide. But I'm sure that across the community there is an increase in this type of attack. Not all single punches cause homicides, but it's on the increase with the general lawlessness that's present in the community, fueled by alcohol and other substances.
Do you think that alcohol is the major problem or just part of it?
Well, I've been in public life for 52 years and I think alcohol plays a significant part in it. There's no question that the ability to consume alcohol in smaller drinks, particularly spirits, has had a major influence upon the quick intoxication of young people, whereas when I was a youth it was quite a considerable quantity of beer that you'd have to drink before you become as intoxicated as some of the young men that we see on our streets, and young women too, on our streets these days.
What do you think about the way New South Wales is dealing with these cases in comparison to other states, including Western Australia, which does have a one-punch law?
Yes, no, I'm well aware of what's occurring in Western Australia. Now, I think that we do in New South Wales a very good job. Our sentencing laws are considered and measured by very experienced judges, and every opportunity is put forward by the system to allow their counsel and to call evidence to ameliorate the end punishment. And generally speaking, the precedents that have been set by our superior courts are followed closely, and I think it's quite satisfactory.
Do you think the sentences for the cases are adequate? Obviously, a lot of the families of victims often say, it's inadequate, it's not enough of a deterrent. What do you think of those statements?
Well, I do think that the sentences are adequate in all of the circumstances. To take a young man who has never been in trouble with the police previously, and in most cases this is the case, to take him from the community and put him into custody for generally, I think the sentences range for around about 3 to 4 years minimum. That's non-parole period. That's a long time to take a young man from the community, but there again, it's a very serious homicide that's occurred, and one's sympathy not only is there for the victim, but there's also a degree of understanding, not sympathy, but understanding for the plight of your client.
In your view, do you think that there needs to be more education about the dangers of single punch cases, but also violence in general. Do you think that campaigns such as Real Heroes Walk Away, that type of thing, would help?
Well, I think if we deal with the Real Heroes Walk Away and violence generally, yes, that's the first and most important point to consider. Not everybody considers that their punch is going to become a one-punch homicide. So I think we've got to deal with violence generally, and mostly it's alcohol-fuelled violence, as well as, in my experience, unexplained behaviour from young men and women who otherwise have been of impeccable character and come from very, very good families, professional families, and they behave in the most bizarre way. And a lot of them will attribute it to not alcohol but to some other substances. And I think that's one of the great dangers, because it reduces the awareness of injury that can be impacted upon individuals, and of course they do these things without thinking of a homicide. They do it either as a spontaneous rebuke of what they sense to be an insult or a threat which is not forthcoming, and their minds are generally affected, as I said, by either alcohol and or some other substances.
The case of Jeremy Beasley in particular, could you tell me about how his life has changed since that particular case occurred, and what the consequences of his actions have been on both him and his family?
Yes, thank you. Well, without reflecting upon Jeremy Beasley, for whom I appeared, and I'd prefer not to speak about Jeremy's family, but Jeremy's family falls into the same category. Caring, loving parents, loving girlfriend. He falls into the same category as a lot of these other young men that I've represented from time to time, with no prior convictions. Sticking up for mates can sometimes lead to these one-punch homicides, and the result in relation to Jeremy has well been publicised in the past, so I'd prefer not to comment about Jeremy.
That's fine. Just finally, how quickly, from your experience, can things escalate from a few words to a punch, a fall, an injury, death, from seeing cases that you've worked on?
Well, I think over the years they take seconds, from 0 to 10 seconds to 20 seconds, and the tragedy has occurred in that period of time. It's such a short period that the offenders themselves never give consideration. They haven't got time to think about it. Fueled by alcohol, and that reduces their inhibitions, and of course they strike out. And once they strike out, the result is there for all to see, and that's when the regret starts to follow.